So welcome everyone. नमस्कार, आप सबका स्वागत है। राजीव गांधी फाउंडेशन एक ऑनगोइंग सीरीज कर रहा है जिसमें हम बहुत ही माननीय लोग ले रहे हैं, और जिसमें कि हम इंडिया एट 75, द नेम ऑफ द सीरीज इज इंडिया एट 75, एंड जिसमें हम ऐसे लोगों को जिन्होंने अपने कार्यकाल में बहुत ही बड़ा अचीवमेंट किया है, और इस चीज को हम बहुत ही जिन्होंने आर्ट एंड क्राफ्ट एंड कल्चर के रिवाइवल पे बहुत ही बड़ा काम किया है। सो आज श्री दशरथ पटेल जी की 11वीं डेथ एनिवर्सरी है, और उसमें हम दशरथ पटेल जी को याद करते हुए एक छोटी सी वीडियो हमने बनाई है उनको याद करते हुए, उसको हम प्ले कर रहे हैं।
श्री दशरथ पटेल जी का जन्म सन 1927 सोजित्रा, गुजरात में हुआ। दशरथ पटेल जी ने फाइन आर्ट्स की पढ़ाई गवर्नमेंट कॉलेज ऑफ फाइन आर्ट्स चेन्नई से की। श्री देवी प्रसाद रॉय चौधरी इनके गुरु थे। आगे की पढ़ाई इन्होंने पेरिस से की। स्कल्प्टर, पेंटर, डिज़ाइनर और फोटोग्राफर्स श्री दशरथ पटेल जी 1961 से 1981 तक नेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ डिज़ाइन के फाउंडर सेक्रेटरी रहे। 1981 में इन्हें पद्मश्री से नवाजा गया और 2011 में इन्हें मरणोपरांत पद्म भूषण से सम्मानित किया गया। एक कलाकार के रूप में पटेल जी लाइट, कलर और स्पेस में बहुत रुचि रखते थे, जो हमें इनके कृतियों में देखने को मिलता है।
आशा करता हूँ कि आप लोगों को ये वीडियो, हमारी कोशिश आप लोगों को बहुत पसंद आई होगी। और मैं आज हमारे साथ बहुत ही खास गेस्ट हैं, श्रीमती ललिता दत्ता जी। और ललिता दत्ता जी की खासियत ये कि मतलब वो बहुत ही पहली स्टूडेंट रही हैं दशरथ पटेल जी की। और ललिता दत्ता जी डिज़ाइनर हैं, एजुकेटर हैं, 35 साल से ज़्यादा उन्होंने काम किया है। और आज हम थोड़ी सी बातचीत करेंगे मैम के साथ। और मैम, बहुत बहुत वेलकम आपका।
Thank you, Namik. Thank you for having me here. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. And I would love to share whatever my little experiences with you. And yes, when you reached out to me, I was very curious, and I said, Dashrath, I can't refuse this. I have to do it, because whatever it may be, we've learned so many things, but he's actually, to a large extent, made me who I am today. So I would like to share whatever questions you have for me and whatever the audience would also like to know. I see a lot of also familiar people here who have worked very closely with him, Christine, Sadanand, I think, follow me also, if it's the same person. So it would be really nice to have the session. So we can go ahead with it.
Sure, ma'am. So my first question to you as Dashrath Patel ji as a teacher, your views, ma'am.
So, yeah, I think that is really the most interesting question in a way, because as a teacher, he was not the conventional teacher. And I hope I've imbibed some of those qualities. And while we work in a very structured environment today, I try and go into the non-conventional somehow. So Dashrath as a teacher was very, very different. You know, I first met him way back in 1976, the year I joined NID. And in our first year, we didn't have very much interaction. We did to some extent, because at that time, NID was doing a very large exhibition called the Agri Expo. And we were in foundation, so we were not directly involved, but we were all taken to see this exhibition. It was at the Pragati Maidan in Delhi. And he was so involved with everything. His vision for what was exhibition design and what was art, what was aesthetics, was just amazing. It was very, very different. So we learned, we saw things, and, you know, a little bit was explained and taught to us. And I was fascinated at that point in exhibition design. At that time, NID did not have exhibition design as a discipline. But the very next year, when we were going into our specialization, they decided to open this up as a specialization at NID. And in my jury, which is our final year evaluation, I was asked which discipline I'd like to join. And many of the great people of NID were sitting around the table, and sadly, a lot of them have passed away today, I mean, now in the current scenario. And I said without hesitation, I said, you know, I'd like to do exhibition design. And I was sitting at this table, and I didn't know what happened, but everybody got up and pointed to Dashrath and started clapping and said, there you are, Dashrath, you got your first student for exhibition design. It was a great feeling. And I can't forget this, you know, scenario. It kind of plays in my head all the time. And later on, we had more people join us. And initially, we were a very small group of 5 people in exhibition design. And Dashrath didn't believe in, you know, some kind of blackboard learning and, you know, giving us notes. And those things just never existed. For him, it was about how we saw things, how we looked at things. And so one of his first lessons to me was, I still remember, and I've quoted this in an article also, which I've written. He saw me walking down the corridor one day, and he said, I used to have really long hair at that time and was with a sari and whatnot and wearing chappals. He said, come, you're looking very nice. I'm going to take you for a ride. This was in the morning at 8:30 or whatever, 7:38, whatever. So he took me to this dry riverbed on the banks of the Sabarmati in Ahmedabad. And it was really dry those days. Now we have a riverfront and whatnot. And he said to me, it was, I think, just after the monsoons, maybe, I'm not sure exactly when, I can't remember. What do you see? He says to me. So I said, I looked a little confused, and I said, well, I can see the sky and the river. And he said, okay, but beyond that, what do you see? So then I looked a little more, and then I said, okay, I can see this, and I can see this, and I can see that. And then he said, now you're beginning to see. And now that you're beginning to see, you're going to make a really good designer. And that was my first lesson from Dashrath Bhai. And subsequently, he gave us the opportunity to work on some really, really nice projects. And those days, NID used to do a lot of projects. And Dashrath never believed in marks and grades and, you know, all those kind of things. So we really, our department, everybody was very envious of us, because we never went into juries, we never got marks, we never got grades. And we were stuck till our end of our 4th year, when everybody suddenly, the institution said, what have these students been doing? So, but we'd been doing a lot of interesting work, and we'd been, you know, seeing all these things from learning from Dashrath and few other people. Dashrath would come into the studio early in the morning holding up a collage which he's worked the whole night on. And he'd say, see what I've done. And with that complete childlike enthusiasm. And I think that was the best part about him. He was very childlike in his thinking. He was completely unaffected with things that were going around him. He was proud of what he did. And he was very happy to share it with us and to share our work with him as well, as and when. So we would all be dabbling in various things, because we realized at that time, I think one of the lessons again was that design is not a singular thing. It's very multifaceted. It's multidisciplinary. You can borrow from the arts, you can borrow from film, you can borrow from, sculpture, painting, photography, virtually anything and everything, and make it. You can give it your own imprint. You can create your own stories around it. So I think that was a great learning. And the subsequent learning, I think, became that Dashrath was a great storyteller. And today I realize now, after almost 35, 40 years of being a designer, design professional, teacher, educator, whatever, that storytelling is a very important thing. And the way we tell the stories, the way we narrate, life stories or whatever experiences can make or change a student's viewpoint. It can create an interest in class. And I think that is also one of the greatest learnings I had from him, how to be a storyteller. Yeah. So that's, I think, the answer to the first part of your question. These are some early memories. There are other memories, and so on and so forth. Yes.
My second question to you, ma'am, is like, what is the most important thing you have learned from him? Because a lot of viewers would love to.
I think, I'll reiterate the same thing, coming back to what the two very important things I learned from him. One is that, as designers, we have to learn to see. And what we learn to see is we have to create for ourselves that vision. You could see beauty in a stone lying on the footpath. You can see beauty, when the dewdrop is falling on a leaf. You can see beauty in a child's face, in an old woman's face, in an adult's face. You can see, art through the color of the skies, the waves on the seashore. There's so many things that surround us that we can see. And one of the things which I have learned, and which I still try and tell my students, because everybody is so obsessed with the phone today. They're always just, it's all like this. So I tell them, I said, till date, when I step out of my house or wherever it is, and I'm sitting in a car or wherever, whatever, I try and avoid looking at the phone. I'm still looking out of the window, because I'm seeing so many things happening. The fellow selling vegetables, the matka fellow on the road, there's some little fight going on with two people, some man is sitting with a parrot. Our country is full of images, of visions. And if you see this with a lot of interest, you form those visions, you form those images in your head, and you never know where those images take you. So I think this was one of the greatest things I learned, is that you have to keep seeing all the time. If you stop seeing, you're a dead person. So whether you see a film and you look at it critically, or you look at it just from the point of view of fun, you're still seeing something. Something is emerging, something is creating an impact in your visual memory. And how you use that memory, how do you create stories within, stories? How do you put together stories? I think that is important. So as again, I'm saying, storytelling is very, very important. Remembrance, memory, these are very important things as artists, as designers, because we borrow a lot from a lot of things that happen around us. We can see lines in something, we can see shapes in something else. As a child, very often you are made to look at the sky and said, oh, see, can you see that man over there? See, that's a peacock or a bird. That's seeing, that's creating a form, that's creating, a form within a space. So these are very important things. And I think this was one of the few things I really, really learned from my early learning with Dashrath. Also, he had this great ability to just pack us into a van and take us off somewhere, and we would go exploring the countryside. And as I said, there were only 5 of us initially in this discipline. So it was very easy for us to do that. So now it's very difficult because obviously the number of students are a lot more. And we would head off to look at some folk theatre somewhere, some village somewhere else, go off to the Palitana temple. And all these were experiences because, there was nothing planned. We would be eating gathias by the roadside, having tea in the little coolers, and didn't have a place to stay one night. So we were all sleeping in the van. Now, as students, very few students nowadays can have this experience also because of the safety and so many other factors in today's world. But we lived in this very fanciful, I think, kind of world, very happy sort of utopian culture in a manner of speaking, where we could experience all this. And it's made me what I am today. And I try and I hope that I can, share some of my knowledge, my memories, my storytelling, my whatever it is with people I interact with, students I interact with. So that's been a great learning. It's been a very interesting journey with him. Also seeing the way he would put together his art, his photography, his ceramics. We learned of all these great names, Buckminster Fuller, Cartier-Bresson, and Matisse from Dashrath. I mean, as young 18-year-olds at that time, there was no internet, there were no computers, so we were not Googling people to see what they were doing. So Dashrath would tell us, when I was with Matisse, I did this. This is what I learned from Cartier-Bresson, and Dashrath would always have a camera hanging around his neck. And he would share these images of Bresson with us, beautiful black and white images. We all know he's, of course, an extremely well-known photographer. But, having actually to hear this from Dashrath was again a learning because he would share his experiences with them and would try and again sort of get us all involved and, all very excited about it. So, which was again a great learning because you learned about things without having to actually learn through something else. And I think that has been a great, great, great learning. Great learning. Yeah.
Yeah. It's quite wonderful because, like when you were talking about seeing things, I was also thinking that the Sanskrit word for philosophy is darshan, to see and to see beyond and to see through something, to see more than what you just see. And I think that's really lovely as a starting point for an artist to realize the importance of it, of seeing. Connecting, especially, as you were mentioning, his collaborations with Bresson and Matisse and Cartier, and, and, and that's something that is a very integral part of designing, as you said, that, you work in all different kinds of arts. In one of the quotes that I was reading of Dashrath, he also says that, an artist must also sculpt and they should also do every other thing. This should not be confined to one art form. So, and this I think would be a wonderful thing to all the young people who are with us today to think about. What do you think is the role of collaborative processes? And, like in an interesting way, there's also always a collaboration between an art, a teacher and his students or her students, So, collaboration as an artistic practice, what are your views on that?
I think collaboration is very important. It's always been very important. We've looked at it in different ways. Today, we are, I think, awakening to the fact that collaboration can get us very exciting results. So brands are collaborating and creating things. Artists are collaborating and creating things. Designers are collaborating, creating things. Students can collaborate and create projects. So this process of collaboration is very interesting because you're putting not just one mind, but you're putting several minds together. You're looking at a process through a process to be able to create something which is, which can actually mean so many things to so many people. It can help sell a product, it can create a product, it can create a story, it can create a film, it can create so many things. So collaborative processes is very important in the creative field, not just in the creative field, I would say definitely in the creative field, but in so many fields today, even in a terrible thing like marketing and sales, you can be collaborating. And I think to be open to the fact of collaboration is very important. a lot of artists in earlier times would hang on to their art. They didn't want to share it with anybody. They would say, this is my piece. I am so and so, I'm not going to share it with anybody. That has changed completely, completely. And in today's context, artists are more open-minded. They're open to many things happening. You can collaborate dance and art together. You can collaborate poetry and theater together. So there are many, many parallels that you can create within this creative journey. And people are doing this. Younger people are working, with theater and poetry, with film and art. There's so many things happening. And what it's doing is that it's bringing sensitivity to an art form in a manner of speaking. It's also allowing different kinds of expression. It's also allowing people to come out of a comfort zone and explore many options. And I think the end results are really, really interesting to see. And I can see this happening through several things, through art and design and all these other creative fields, as I just mentioned today. And as educators, sometimes, it's very difficult if you're in a very structured environment, but I take my students again off the beaten path sometimes and I say, okay, let's just do this. And take them out of their comfort zone and put them somewhere else. There's always resistance initially when you do something new. And I think that's how it all began also. There was resistance. But once they're in that environment, once they begin creating, once they begin having a dialogue, once you begin interacting, once you begin resource sharing and sharing of thought, you can actually come up with many, many things. And those many things can again lead to many things. And that as a process becomes a collaborative process. And that can take you into many genres of many things. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. And I also want to connect something to this, which I think, especially in a series like India at 75, in which we are basically looking at, last 75 years as a nation building process, as a process where we have built various aspects of this country, not only in arts, but also in science, technology, policy making, lots of education, lots of different aspects of it. And I think a lot of us are already discussing these things, the importance of institutions in that, in providing that space, even the collaboration that we are talking about, the interdisciplinary ness of a lot of these institutions, which have given us the space, as you said, that you had the space to be able to be like that, be a student who could travel like that, work like that, to give that space of conversation, of collaboration, of discussion, of creation, is very, very necessary. You have been a part of National Institute of Design for such a long time. So I would also we would also like to know your views on the importance of these institutions. What do you think can be done about it? Where do you think it's going?
Okay, now this is interesting because just last Saturday, in fact, I presented a paper to a university in Japan, which was about memories and institutions and what we learn through them and what processes we've taken through them. Of course, mine was very specific to something, but institutions per se have a great impact on a person's personality, growth, self-expression, development, future trends and thoughts, and all that. However, having said that, a lot of institutions today are unfortunately business ventures. And there's nothing we can do about it. There'll be very few institutions that are actually willing to not look at the institution as a revenue model, but actually as institutions imparting some kind of holistic education. And we're all victims of this game. I'm really unfortunately sorry to say, because we are all earning our living in a manner of speaking. But it is, I think, more up to the educator and to the teachers who reside in these scenarios to actually take their thoughts forward, to be that open-minded liberal person within that structured environment. Now, it's not very easy to do. It's very complicated to do because as I mentioned to you, I mean, I've been in this education gig now for 30 odd years, and I've seen institutions change, philosophies change, this greed for money. There's so many things happening. Also, there's a dearth of good institutions, people wanting from every institution, we are paying this much of fees, why are we not getting that? Institutions are juicing people for more and more and more, and it's become like a bit of a chaos. But within this chaos, you can still strive to promote interesting education, evocative education in a manner of speaking, create, subplots within the main plot. And that, however, is left to the educator. So, like now in my current scenario where I'm heading a certain situation, it's up to me as a leader in that leadership role to empower my younger faculty to be able to do different things. And a lot of them come with really good ideas and they get stuck in this structure of, अरे attendance देना है, 75% attendance नहीं मिला बच्चे को, 9:30 बज गए बच्चे क्लास में नहीं है, what is going on, we have to give these marks, there's an exam tomorrow. Like this morning I was in this kind of zoo-like scenario. But you need to get out of that. You need to adapt. And institutions have to be adaptive environments in many ways, which some are not, some are struggling, and some are actually, the onus is actually in the people who are, taking on these roles. So I kind of, everybody tells me, oh, you're very chilled out and, all that. But I'm maybe one of the few people who are chilled out. Now, I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's certainly not going to get me brownie points, or my salary is not going up for sure. But I'm happy doing what I'm doing because I'm definitely empowering the people who work with me to be open, and they're very happy doing that, to create within that structured environment an unstructured environment as well. This, if you look at artistic, the history of, art and artistic education, the earliest institution that I can actually think of is Shantiniketan.
Yeah.
And when Tagore founded that, when it was in its earlier inception, the whole idea was to have a very relaxed, very conducive environment to learning. People could sing, dance, there was art, there was theater, there was music. It was a very beautiful, beautiful structure in a manner of speaking. Unfortunately, as an institution today, it's kind of, I don't know, I shouldn't really be commenting like that, but it's lost some of that glory which it started out with. Similarly, even NID, you don't blame them because, the number of students have gone up. That little charm of sitting under a tree and learning is no longer there. We can't blame anybody because technology has changed for us. Information, what should I say? Access to information has become so much easier. Earlier, we would be sitting in a library and struggling, pouring through hundreds of journals and books to, get information which we could use for some kind of project that we were doing. Now it's just click, 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 and you have everything. There's Google Mata for all. So, if Google packs off on it, there was one situation, I think last year for half an hour, the Google stopped working. And like I got some 40 mails and messages in that time, Now imagine how dependent we've become on this thing called Google. It's really scary in a manner of speaking. On the other hand, it's taken us to another level, to another dimension. Institutions have built themselves around technology. Technology is a part of all curriculum learning. It has to be also. But we have to know, somewhere we have to know, through institutions, through education, where we can make it more exciting, where we can go into this zone which, where like Dashrath would walk in, let's say, with a painting and share his whole thought process behind the painting with us. Early in the morning, we've not even had our breakfast. So we are actually wanting to have our breakfast, but we are listening to him talk. Now that kind of thing has to come back in a way. It's not easy. It's not going to be easy. But if some people make that effort, put their lives, turn it around a little bit, I'm sure a lot of things can happen. But by and large, yes, there are many institutions of art and design today. Each one is trying to outbid and outdo the other. I can't say which one is good, which one is bad, which one is what, because everybody has their pros and cons. But at the end of the day, it is the student or it is the graduate or the professional who's coming out from these places. That person should have imbibed a certain artistic culture. Now that I hope is happening. That's all I can say.
Coming back to Dashrath ji, and as you mentioned that he would have these ideas and he would come and edit them, and what are your views on the subjects and ideas that are expressed in his work? What do you think really fascinated him?
Yeah, I think he was a very, very versatile person because he could wield a paintbrush as happily as he could sculpt, cast a pot on a wheel, make collages, um, fly a kite, collect sarees, look at pots in different ways, use the camera, teach us something or the other as we went along, do these fantastic large exhibitions. He really conceptualized some really beautiful exhibitions in his time, and I think that's what he was. He was an extremely versatile, multidisciplinary, multi-talented person. Um, I think not probably given the due that he even deserved. It's fantastic that he got his Padma Shri and later his Padma Bhushan, but not people sort of actually appreciated a lot of things, which is very sad because even at NID, and I can say this with candor to some extent, people always thought he was a bit crazy and he was not, getting into this normal track of things and all that. Whereas we just felt very differently because we lived very closely to him on a day-to-day basis for those 4-5 years that we were there. So we saw this different side of the personality. A lot of people didn't see that side of the personality. And I know for a fact what a multidisciplinary person he was, extremely. And the thinking process was completely something else. So there's this famous story, I think I've shared it also somewhere else, that one day he had invited some of us to his house for dinner. And Gujarat being that time very vegetarian and all that, he said, "Oh, I'm going to make you an egg cake." So we were all, the 3-4 of us were there and we were very excited. We were going to have an egg cake of some sort. And we went. And so what was Dashrath doing? He was whipping up omelette after omelette after omelette and putting them, stacking them all together till it, got about 4 inches thick. And then he cut a slice out and said, "See, that's a cake." Now, it's such a simplistic thing, but just that aesthetic of it happening in that way was so exciting. So we said, "Oh, wow, this is a good idea." Something as simple as that. So, well, that's it.
So just like amazing to listen to the stories, and this is like amazing. I'm what you're like telling us, and I'm hoping like everybody is loving, like I am doing right now, the stories we are listening. So how does lockdown affected artists during COVID-19? This is very.
I think Namek, it worked in 2 ways. Many people got a great expression of art because it allowed them to be, not, I would say, be bothered with what's happening in the rest of the world around them. And for some, it was a pressure point of just being at home and not being able to go out and do things and whatever it was. I have to tell you, share my own story of this time. So I was always wanting to do watercolors, for many, many years. And I felt it was a very difficult medium, and I don't have that kind of patience in my artistic endeavors to be able to sit very painstakingly and do something. But during this lockdown, I decided one day, and I pulled out some of my son's old drying watercolors and stole some paper from him. And I said, let me give this watercolor thing a shot. And I'm very fond of nature, so I thought I'll do botanical kind of illustrations. And I'm not a great one at looking at YouTube tutorials, and I can't do all that. I can't learn from something that's happening on a little screen. That's not my idea of whatever. But I looked at some images here and there, and I said, okay, let me give this a shot. And before I knew it, like in 3 months, maybe 3.5 months, I was churning out like 2 paintings small in a day. And I felt, and I have an uncle who's a brilliant watercolor artist, and he's in the US. So he gave me a few tips, and he says, you're improving. And suddenly he said, my God, this is fantastic. Now, that was something I think a lot of people discovered, that they could do something which was different from their normal day-to-day kind of pursuits. So for me, this became a very personal thing, and I have really now gathered a body of my sort of botanical illustrations in watercolor. And like that, I think a lot of people went into, making short films. They did things at home. Some got into cooking and baking, which are also artistic pursuits in a manner of speaking, I would say. So while it affected a lot of us, I think a lot of people mentally, I think a lot of people went through a lot of confusion, because you never knew where you were placed, who was getting COVID next to you, were you going to be the next victim, क्या होने वाला है, कब खत्म होएगा, बाहर कैसे जाएंगे, खाना कैसे, बाहर से क्या सब्जी. So online became a big thing. So a lot of things happened, and within that, a lot of artistic people, I think, discovered many dimensions to themselves, and lot, I think, also went kind of underground in a manner of, I think, possibly, because I know it happened to a few people I know. They were not very happy. They were just, the thing of not being able to go out and do things was bothering them. So I think people looked at it in different ways. Some emerged very strong with their own artistic endeavors, well positioned. Some lost out on it. For us as educators, it became a challenge to teach online. How do you deliver a course in typography online? So I had to really reinvent my wheel and see what I could do. Fortunately, I have very tech smart, young, faculty with me. So I would tell them, this is what I want, this is how it has to happen. And they would do it for me in some way. And then we would, teach the student online. So that was also a way of learning. That was also an artistic, I would say, endeavor in trying to put something across to people. So it's been a difficult time. It's not been the easiest of times. It's not been the simplest of times, but it's been a time. And I think it's going to be there for a while. It's not gone away as yet. So let's hope and see what comes out of it in the next few months and, all that.
My last question to you, what would you like to say to the young generation who sees art as their future?
Ooh, well, if you want to be a creative person, you have to let go of a lot of demons in your head. And you have to be able to be a free soul in some ways. Now, when I say a free soul, doesn't mean you're completely wild and you're some, dope smoking nerd. No, that's not what it is. It is a person who can embrace his or her own thoughts and make it into a passion, in a manner of speaking. Anything that's creative has to come, as I said, I always say to my students, and I put my hand here and I said, ye kya hai? And they say heart, dil. So I said, dil se. And if it's not dil se, if it's not from your heart, art and design, anything creative, if it's not from your heart, it's superficial then. It has to come from within. You have to be able to embrace it in many ways. You have to be able to see the beauty around you. You have to see the ugliness around you as well, to be able to see where this world can actually take you. You have to constantly update yourselves through technology, through what's happening around you, through what other people are doing, through what other countries are doing, through what students and professionals are doing in other countries, the kind of things that are taking place. And if you're abreast of all this, if you're sort of confident in understanding these kind of things, I think you can make a great creative person. Some people think that just because you draw very well, you could be a creative person. Yes, you certainly, that's just one part of a personality or one facet of being creative. But creativity comes from within, it comes from your soul, it comes from your heart. And I think the more you experience it and the more you go on in life, the more you realize how much of creativity is there. You know, sometimes I have a lot of people telling me that, ma'am, ye kaise karte ho aap din ke, har din you come up with some new thing. So I tell them that, you know, it's not as if I'm thinking anything different, new. It's just that I'm seeing what is happening around me and I have to move with that. I can't be also left in some decadent era and say, no, I can't do this. So you have to put together things to make things happen. And a truly creative person is going to be able to do that, because a truly creative person like Dashrath is actually a multidisciplinary person. You have to take, you know, it's like doing a jigsaw puzzle. So यहाँ से करके that puzzle has to be complete. And when you complete that puzzle, you feel actually very proud of yourself. So you have to take pride in your work also. You have to take pride in your work. You have to take onus for your work, and you have to take वो खुशी आनी चाहिए कि यार मैंने ये किया है यार, I did this. So that has to happen. Once that begins to happen, you automatically become a very creative, very evolved sort of human being. And I think a lot of creative people are very evolved people. They push it under their carpet. They don't talk about it, but they are, you know, like, I don't know. You can speak to so many creative people. They will have so many sides to their personality that you will be amazed. You'll just be amazed. And I think that's the beauty of being a creative person or being in a creative profession, because it's going to give you the platform to be able to do so many different things. And these are, you know, your things. You're not sitting in some daftar and signing some files every day. That is, to me, very scary. So I always tell my students, would you rather be a chartered accountant or would you rather be a designer? So they get a little rattled sometimes, and then they say, no, but you know, chartered accountants can earn this much. So those are choices you have to make. I'm not saying all creative people are geniuses and are going to be earning, you know, lakhs like what Hussein did or XYZ did. But I think it's about being proud of yourself, your work, your achievements, your accomplishments, being in a certain societal context. And if you're there even in small measure, you'll feel great about it. And I think, as my message to youngsters is that if you want to be a creative person, you have to follow your heart. You have to make it your motto to follow your heart.
Yeah, that's very well put. We also have Mrs. Saranam today with us, Saranam Menanji, who has been extremely supportive. All the images that you saw in the beginning in the video were very kindly, graciously provided by him. So Saranamji, if you would like to add something, or if you'd like to respond to any of the things that we've discussed so far, that would be very beautiful.
Sadanand has had a great journey with Dashrath. He'll be able to tell you a lot more than me, I'm sure.
Hello, Saranamji. How are you doing?
Yeah.
Hi,
Thank you
Sada.
for asking me to speak. But then I think after this excellent session with Lolita, whatever I say is going to be redundant. I think she said it very brilliant.
I'm sure you can add some more flavor to it.
Because I knew Lolita during that year when she started working with Dashrath in the
mid-70s.
Design faculty, and that Lolita and the Lolita today are two different human beings and two different persons. And I think some of it is probably the fact that she internalized whatever Dashrath was transmitting in a subliminal way, and that was the most interesting part of Dashrath, that he was a non-teacher. He was not teaching anybody. He was just being himself. And if you get attracted to that, then you get attracted for life, and it stays with you forever. And it's not like some book you read and you know, by the rote method, or some teacher who has spanked you to learn in some particular way, or some major assignment you're put to do. It's it's called this Sahaj, it's a very spontaneous learning. And it's learning through the eyes of someone who's experienced life in a particular manner. So if Dashrath is pointing out a tree to you, it's not because it's some fascination with the tree. It's a particular form that he's seeing, it's a particular shape he's seeing. And if you're able to see it through his eye, then it's a learning forever. It's like you didn't have to go to school for that, or you didn't have to be a botanist for that. So I think I'm seeing that in Lolita. I think she has articulated many things that Dashrath would have been probably proud of. And I'm very glad that we've been able to organize this session. And Dashrath, like Lolita said, is a person who, for some strange reason, remained in the margins or in the background, even though he was a pioneer in the design education and the design discipline in the Indian context, and was among the foremost painters of that era, and continued to be so. His colleagues were people like Hussain and Raza and Ara and so on and so forth. He came from that group of artists who worked in Bombay. But if you look at the art history of India, you'll find very little mention of Dashrath. If you look at the design history of India, even in NID, you look at the history that NID has created for itself, Dashrath is an absent figure. People talk about him, but they don't really know him. You talk about the current crop of students in NID, very few will really know about him. Only last year or year before last, some correction was made to this when the ceramic design department of NID was celebrating its 15th anniversary, and they especially invited, they created a whole session around Dashrath, and they invited Christine Michael, who was also among his first students of ceramic, to speak about him and so on. So it's a very interesting. This happens often in history writing, that some people go into a black hole. They may be geniuses, they would have contributed enormously, but for some reason, people around them don't speak about them enough, or don't, mention them with the kind of context that is necessary. And this contextualization is missing in much of our history writing and our history making. And you will see many very well-known Indian writers or theater people or filmmakers who suddenly vanish. They would have made great contributions, but for some reason they are behind the parda. And it needs people to bring them out and to understand their work, to explain their work and so on. So it would be interesting if the RGF at some point also thinks of creating an exhibition of Dashrath's work. After all, like Lalita says, he worked with painting, he worked with sculpture, with ceramic, with architecture, with photography, with drawing, as a whole range of things. And much of that material is still available in Ahmedabad, where his sister maintains an archive, and in Chennai, where I maintain an archive. So if necessary, one can do some small exhibition which brings out this multifaceted personality. Delhi knows Dashrath. We've had a major retrospective of his work at the National Gallery of Modern Art in 1998. Every single hall of the NGMA was filled with his work. Over 450 works were presented. And it was a major retrospective, probably the first retrospective that the NGMA had. And later on, it was repeated in Bombay, etc., NGMA Bombay. But it's time to reconnect with some of these geniuses who, in one sense, created a visual language for India. And we all used to say, often in a jocular way, but also in a real way, that he was a visual genius. Here was a man who maybe would not be very articulate with words, but when it came to the visual field, he was an absolute genius. He could work with line, shape, with form, with color, in a manner that very few people around us have been able to do. So it was like a very, very special kind of an artist. And I think it's time to re-acknowledge some of these personalities. So thank you for doing this event. I'm very glad that you invited Lolita, and she's done tremendous justice to me.
Thank you. Thank you for being so supportive.
Thank you. Thank you.
And actually, to add to what Anandji was saying, that is sort of, the objective that we have started off with, and we hope that we're able to fulfill it. That there's so many narratives, you know, in every field that don't get the kind of limelight that they deserve. And in this little way, we are trying to start a conversation about it, which might eventually, you know, if everything goes well, also turn into, say, an exhibition or a film festival or a retrospective of some sort. So, you know, I think it's a great opportunity for all of us to come together and think through these ideas and, you know, think about a lot of these figures, which have not been discussed as much as they should have. I also think that it was a very intense conversation. So,
Thank you.
you
I
know, and
hope
it
I've
was,
been able to contribute to what you want me to say.
no, no, this
And
is really wonderful.
yes, yeah. Thank
Very,
you so
very
much.
intense. But at the same time, I think, you know, for even for somebody who is not familiar with Dashrathji's work, I'm sure this was a conversation which would make them interested in going out there and looking at it, which I think is half the job done.
Yes,
You know?
true,
So
very
once,
true,
once,
very true,
yeah.
very
So
true.
once
Yeah.
we go there, so
Yeah.
I want to thank you all for being here, especially Lolita and Saranji. And I think this has been really, really wonderful listening to both of you and to Namik. And also, इसी तरह से आप हमसे जुड़े रहिए. एक बार फिर से I want to thank Lolita and Sadanand ji. So it's really lovely to talk to you all, and thank you so much. And we are going to have these sessions every month once. And please, you know, if you follow us on our social media, you will be updated about when you can join us, and you can also get the links. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Lalita ji. Thank you, Sadanand ji.
Thank you, Namik. Thank you, Ankush. Thank you, Sada, for contributing. And it was a pleasure. Thank you.